So here's what you missed on Mike the Snare. Mike makes videos about music on YouTube.com. He's covered topics like So Bad It's Good Music, KK Slider, Carly Rae Jepsen, and what music defined the 2010s. During quarantine, he spent months watching Glee, which sent him on a downward spiral of insanity and show tunes. He also brings up Crazy Frog a lot, but nobody knows why. And that's what you missed on... It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I had the idea earlier this year to do a cute little video on Glee, talk about the early seasons, some of the best musical numbers, stop around season 4 like most people. Then I started watching, and I kept watching and digging into the business of the show. At a certain point, I knew this had to be bigger. So join me, if you will, on an exhilarating dive into the pop culture phenomenon that was... In late summer 2005, actor Ian Brennan wrote the first draft of a film based on his experience in high school show choir. A few years passed with him shopping the script around with little success. Eventually, Brennan's friend passed the script along to a colleague who happened to go to the same gym, Ryan Murphy. Murphy was fresh off the success of FX's Nip Tuck, which he ran along with Brad Falchuk. As a show choir kid himself, Murphy loved the idea. He and Falchuk met up with Brennan, and the trio rewrote the script as a TV show. Within hours of sending it to Fox, the show was greenlit. The pilot was aired after American Idol on May 19th, 2009. Based only on that one episode, the show garnered a ton of attention. It returned later in September of that year. I'm gonna say something that I don't think is that controversial these days. The first episode of Glee is a legitimately great piece of television and one of the best TV pilots of the late 2000s and early 2010s. That includes Mad Men, that includes Breaking Bad, that includes The Walking Dead, that includes Game of Thrones. The pilot follows Will Schuester, a Spanish teacher in his hometown of Lima, Ohio. Feeling unfulfilled in his work and marriage, he decides,
I'd like to take over Glee Club.
You wanna captain the Titanic too?
The auditions bring in emo girl with a stutter Tina Cohen-Chang, diva Mercedes Jones, Kurt Hummel, wheelchair-bound Artie Abrams, and theater prodigy-in-waiting Rachel Berry. Will is also able to rope in star quarterback Finn Hudson by watching him sing in a shower and planting drugs in his locker.
You could land in prison, son.
Oh my God.
At its core, Glee is a show about sad people looking for something greater, and the pilot is the best reflection of that core ethos. It lays out everyone's dynamics and struggles. Will looking for fulfillment even if it endangers his job, marriage, and expected child. Rachel wanting stardom without risking her relationships with everyone else. Finn wanting to follow his passion and do right by his family without sacrificing his place on the pecking order. The entire club having to fight back against an unwelcoming high school ecosystem led by coach of the cheerleading squad and series standout Sue Sylvester.
You think this is hard? Try being waterboarded. That's hard.
And it all culminates in the group's infamous rendition of Journey's Don't Stop Believing. This first episode is a version of Glee that deftly balances snark, self-awareness, and sweetness. It is a version of Glee that shows dreams are worth pursuing even while acknowledging the pain that can come as a result. It is a version of Glee that never comes back again. That might sound a bit harsh, and I don't mean that to say the rest of season 1 is bad, but the show's 1 foot in reality starts lifting right after the pilot, and it only lifts further with each episode. But before I get ahead of myself, let's talk about the good. The first season of Glee is my favorite because even with the high school melodrama and musical numbers, the characters are still well developed enough that following their arcs each week is enjoyable. Alongside the original members, others join, leader of the Cheerios and Finn's girlfriend Quinn Fabray, plus cheerleader Santana Lopez and Brittany S. Pierce, Finn's football friends Noah Puckerman, Mike Chang, this guy who gets to dance and that's it. The main plot lines usually revolve around a lesson Will wants to teach the students, all in preparation for a show choir competition. The students are also dealing with classes, maintaining relationships, and just growing up in junk. One of the most crucial plot lines, and arguably one of the most memorable parts of the show, is Kurt Hummel coming out as gay. This character was specifically written for Chris Colfer after auditioning for Artie, and as the season goes on, more time is dedicated to watching him come to terms with his sexuality. It might not feel like a big deal now, but having a gay high schooler like this on network TV in 2009 was huge. Kurt's storyline was a cornerstone of Glee's thesis. It's Gleesis. The idea that anyone from any background is welcome and valid, even if the execution wasn't always great.
You were right to shine the spotlight on the fact that those kids are minorities. Because you're all minorities. You're in the Glee Club.
No! There are good things to be found in season 1, but it's pretty much common knowledge that at some point within the show's 6 seasons, Glee got bad. When that happened is up to personal opinion, but I want to highlight an article by Emily Vanderwerf who said that the show went sour in its 2nd episode. Specifically, this scene where Will's wife Terry is visiting the doctor about their baby, and she finds out
you're not pregnant. You're having what's called a hysterical pregnancy.
This reveal highlights, as Vanderwerf puts it, the show's propensity to stack up campy, melodramatic storytelling against honest human emotion. It also highlights one of the show's biggest issues in my eyes. No one has to deal with the long-term consequences of any action. Will has to choose between supporting his family with a stable income and helping the Glee Club? Nah, Terry fakes a pregnancy for 12 episodes. Somehow, Will finds out, their marriage crumbles, and he gets to be with the club and pursue guidance counselor Emma Pillsbury. Whoa, Finn finds out Quinn is pregnant, and he might have to give up on his dreams? Nope. Turns out hot tub pregnancies aren't real. You're kidding me. The baby actually belongs to Puck, and Finn and Rachel get to be together. In my opinion, the buildup in certain plot lines feels silly, but the payoff can still be worth it. Terry faking her baby is dumb, but the scene where Will finds out has some great acting between Matthew Morrison and Jessalyn Gilsig. Kurt trying to get his dad and Finn's mom together so that he and Finn can be together is strange. Like, does he know that would make them step-siblings? But it leads to a great scene where they argue, Finn throws out homophobic slurs, and Kurt's dad puts him in his place. Which, by the way, Bert, Kurt's dad, best character in the show, hands down. Every scene with him and Kurt is great, and I wish nothing but the best for this fictional character. But enough about the characters for now. What about the music?
You're not alone.
The first season averaged 5 musical numbers per episode in the first half and 8 in the second half. Sometimes they relate to the plot in a fairly on-the-nose way, sometimes they just sing a fun song. This season also started a few trends the show would follow going forward. Episodes centered around mashups, or episodes focusing on a specific artist or album. For example, an episode dedicated to Madonna, including a full remake of the Vogue music video with Jane Lynch. Guest stars also get to shine in song. Season 1 included Broadway professionals like Kristen Chenoweth and Neil Patrick Harris as Will's former classmates, Idina Menzel as Rachel's biological mother, and Jonathan Groff as head of a rival Glee club and love interest to Rachel. And man, I gotta say, their romance sparks a real awakening. The repertoire is a mix of Broadway musicals and renditions of pop songs. Their more recent selections this season included a jazz piano-led Poker Face, Rihanna's Take a Bow, and Will rapping.
Saying she a gold digger, but she ain't messing with no bro. Thinks you're kinda cute, so she winks back, and then you're feeling really fine, cause the girl is stacked. Cause my style's like a chemical spill. These were rhymes you can vision and feel. She had dumps like a truck. Thighs like what? Baby, move your butt. If you ain't no punk, holla, we want prenup.
The song-making process for each episode went like this. Ryan Murphy chose the songs based on the story and, according to castmates, his encyclopedic knowledge of music, at which point producers Adam Anders and Per Ostrom got to work. With Anders in LA and Ostrom in Sweden, they were a 24-hour producing machine. As one finished work and went to bed, the other woke up and got started. Once they finished, Murphy gave his approval, and the track was sent along to be recorded, choreographed, and filmed. So how are the songs? Fine. They're fine. Ironically, even though this is a music-centric show, there's not much to say about the individual numbers. They're slickly produced, the voices range from okay to great, from newcomers like Corey Monteith and Diana Agron to Broadway stars like Matthew Morrison and Leah Michele. They're often very, very faithful to the original. Maybe they'll be in a different key, maybe they'll add more backing vocals to make it more like a show choir arrangement. Every so often they put a whole different spin on it. Overall, they're serviceable, but aside from a few instances, there's not much reason to listen to these synthetic imitations over their originals. I know calling them synthetic might sound like a jab, but I mean it sincerely, since in all my research for this video, almost no one is credited for any musical role that is in singing or producing. Oftentimes, the magic of these songs come from their connection to the storyline. Finn singing I'll Stand By You to his supposed child, Rachel singing Don't Rain on My Parade as her first big solo number, Mercedes establishing her raw talent with I'm Not Going from Dreamgirls, Jonathan Groff's group doing Bohemian Rhapsody in sync with Quinn giving birth. I'm just amazed that that last one actually exists, like a human being thought of that. Queen, but set it to childbirth. So taken all together, the songs and the mostly effective writing, which was handled solely by Murphy, Falchuk, and Brennan, the first season of Glee was often pretty solid TV, and audiences responded positively. The first half of the season did fairly well, but its second half saw an even bigger jump in viewership. It was nominated for several awards and won 3 Emmys for Ryan Murphy, Jane Lynch, and Neil Patrick Harris. Perhaps most importantly was what was known as the Glee effect. Various news outlets reported a sizable increase in kids and teens joining or wanting to join some music club.
Before the show, there were an estimated 200 show choirs at schools across the country. Now there are about 600. The choirs are often supported by their own fundraising, or if they're lucky, they get paid to perform.
I mean, we can make all the jokes we want about Glee and performing arts kid stereotypes, but we can all agree that more kids getting into music is a good thing. Right? In so many ways, Glee was a hit, but it was about to become so much more. Glee in its first season was a success, but in its second season, it was an imperial phenomenon in the worlds of TV and music. In terms of plot, it was more of what the first season had: teenage drama, social issues, musical numbers. A number of characters were introduced or were given more presence: Santana and Brittany with their relationship, Becky Jackson getting a bigger role as Sue's right-hand pupil,
Give me some chocolate or I will cut you.
Dot Marie Jones as football coach Shannon Beast, Darren Criss as Blaine Anderson, the head of Dalton Academy's a cappella group and love interest to Kurt, and Cord Overstreet. His name in the show is Sam, but you can't have a name like Cord Overstreet and expect me not to use it, come on. We also have guests like the aforementioned Chenoweth and Groff returning, Carol Burnett as Sue's mom, and what might be the most well-known guest appearance in the show's history, Gwyneth Paltrow as a freewheeling substitute teacher. Even with more cast additions and more plot lines going around, I still think season 2 managed to pump out some solid TV, though it definitely felt less consistent. The show's eternal problem of no long-term consequences came back in full force. Even Kurt's troubles with closeted jock Dave Karofsky, something that initially had actual stakes, feels kinda rushed in the grand scope of things. There was also another issue that the show developed, which is, the show will bend any character to its will for plot convenience. For example, the 5th episode revolves around the club putting on Rocky Horror Picture Show for its yearly musical. I see no issue with that. The whole reason they do it, though, is because Will wants to get with Emma, even though she's dating dentist and occasional beach boy John Stamos. It's a total about-face for his character. If there's one area the series still did well in, though, it's the music. Highlights include Mercedes and Santana slaying River Deep Mountain High, their regional's performance of Valerie, and a drumline-infused mashup of Thriller and the Yeah Yeah Yeahs' Heads Will Roll. This was the centerpiece of the Sue Sylvester Shuffle, which aired right after the 2011 Super Bowl. It's also one of the 2 songs Glee did that I think are genuinely great, even outside of the show's context. Themed episodes this season included their first Christmas episode, as well as homages to Britney Spears, Lady Gaga, and Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. They even dabble in original songs, mainly in the episode Original Song. Also, Will doesn't rap anymore.
Wait, the kids don't like it when I rap?
Throughout this season, you might notice they're starting to put in more modern songs. There are still show tunes and pop classics, but you'd be hard-pressed to find an episode that doesn't include a recent song like Empire State of Mind, or Firework, or Raise Your Glass, or even an episode dedicated to Triad Underbridge getting super into Justin Bieber. Like I said though, the show was still solid enough to suspend your disbelief in the moment and not make you notice the blemishes. Like how, despite constantly battling for money and support from the school, the Glee Club has access to both a full band that can play any song at a moment's notice and any stage decorations they want. And with its continued success, spawned a wave of merchandise, promotional material, a worldwide tour, a concert film based on said worldwide tour, a die-hard online community, and of course, the music sales. By the end of the second season, the Glee cast had landed 156 songs on the Billboard Hot 100. 63 in season 1 and 93 in season 2. They beat Elvis's record for most songs placed on the Hot 100 and held that record until this February when Drake beat it. In other words, based solely on that metric, Drake only became more popular than Glee this year. That's insane. But it also requires a deeper look. Glee would eventually get 207 songs on the Hot 100 by the time it ended, which is a massive feat, but there are 3 equally massive disclaimers attached to it: where they placed, how long they stayed, and how they were released. Out of the 207, only 70 landed in the top 50, and out of that 70, only 3 made it to the top 10. Don't Stop Believing, the a cappella rendition of Teenage Dream, and the original song Loser Like Me. The rest occupied the bottom half of the chart. Not only that, but nearly all of the songs were off the chart by the following week. But that was fine, because there would be a new episode and new songs by the following week. This short time on the charts was mainly because, while the songs tore it up in terms of digital sales and YouTube plays, they were virtually non-existent on the radio. Glee owed much of its success to the then booming iTunes, with the platform accounting for a quarter of all music sales the year the show began. They definitely had success with the albums and other licensing opportunities, but it was the singles that made the headlines. Because of Glee's omnipresence in music at the time, it became a new venue for artists to promote their work. Several were immediately eager to get their songs on, like Rihanna and Billy Joel. That said, not everyone was on the hype train. Some, like Coldplay and Neil Diamond, were initially hesitant but eventually allowed their songs to be used. Some, like Slash and Damon Albarn of Blur and Gorillaz, made public statements saying they would not allow their music on the show. The most notable case was Kings of Leon, who said they had turned down an offer for their music to be in the show, and they had never even watched it. Ryan Murphy actually responded to them publicly. I think he was mad. I admire the workhorse pace that Anders and Ostrom kept up, and I understand why they would want to from a business standpoint, but I think as a result, the songs can feel like they were made on an assembly line. To quote an NPR article, Glee songs are a low-cost way to concretize the fleeting experience of watching the program, like personal merit badges earned by watching and liking the show. In other words, the songs from Glee aren't hits, they're souvenirs. That didn't matter though. By the end of season 2, the show's cultural status had been cemented, but cracks in the show's armor were starting to appear. Both critics and fans were beginning to take issue with the critiques I mentioned earlier, which was reflected by the show starting to dip slightly in the ratings. The other big problem was the show's looming plan for the end of season 3. Between seasons 2 and 3, news began to break that most of the cast would be graduating at the end of the 3rd season. Obviously, the cast couldn't stay forever, or else they'd look even older than they already did.
Now, we gotta get cracking though. We lost a few days there, and it's all gonna be about
This whole saga was rife with drama, specifically with the show's breakout stars, Leah Michele, Corey Monteith, and Chris Colfer. News of a spin-off for them came out, which would follow their stories while the main show continued at the high school, but that spin-off was ultimately canceled. Kind of. But we'll get back to that. No matter the case, the show still had a 3rd season to get through. I'm about to harness the Venn diagram of Glee fans and Oasis fans with this next comparison. If seasons 1 and 2 are their Definitely Maybe and Morning Glory, season 3 is their Be Here Now. It is a bloated, messy, exhausting season, even though it's mostly more of the same plot lines that have defined the series so far. The biggest change behind the scenes was the addition of a full writing staff, so that the original trio could pull back or focus on other shows like American Horror Story. New cast members include Sugar Mata, a rich girl who has just the best voice.
Holy sugar!
They also added the 2 winners of the Glee Project. What? Oh yeah, that's right. Amid the whole merch wave, they made an entire reality competition show where the contestants would compete for a role on Glee.
What do you think it was that really made you stand out?
I sang an R&B song. And I'm white.
2 of them ended up getting main roles. Joe is a Christian and Rory is Irish. I'm not selling them short, that's who they are. They also added 2 of the runners-up, Harmony as a rival Glee star, and towards the end, Unique Adams, the first openly transgender character on the show. Blaine now goes to McKinley High, setting off a new rivalry between New Directions and the Warblers. Blaine gets hit with a rock-filled slushie, and in response, Santana and the leader of the Warblers have a sing-off to Smooth Criminal with 2 cellos.
You've been hit by, you've been struck by a smooth criminal.
This exists, there's nothing we can do about it, let's move on. Quinn becomes a punk for like 2 episodes. She also tries to reconnect with her daughter, who had been adopted by Idina Menzel. Speaking of, she starts a new Glee club at McKinley called the Trouble Tones. Members like Mercedes and Santana, feeling neglected in New Directions, defect over, until they don't. Ricky Martin helps Will realize that he is a terrible Spanish teacher. And he does a mariachi version of A Little More Satisfaction. He also asks Finn to be his best man when he marries Emma.
You screwing with me right now?
You taught me more about being a man than anyone I've ever known.
He's a child. Also, when Will proposes, the club does a number in the pool and they just straight up wheel Artie into the water. Outstanding work, everyone involved. I know the ridiculousness of the show is what some people love about it, and if that's you, more power to you. I also acknowledge I binged this show on Netflix. I didn't watch it week by week as it originally aired. That certainly contributed to my growing fatigue. But even despite the ratcheted intensity of these scenes, many of these plot lines feel both tired and tiring. This show used to be a solid balancing act between the satirical and the sensitive, and at this point, it's now both at the same time, but also neither at the same time? There is an episode that within 45 minutes covers Karofsky's suicide attempt soundtrack by Blaine singing Young the Giant's Cough Syrup, a regional's performance, Finn and Rachel almost getting married despite the wishes of their parents, oh yeah, Jeff Goldblum is one of Rachel's gay dads, and a texting while driving PSA with Quinn getting into a car accident and being put in a wheelchair for 5 episodes. That sounds exhausting, right? Me just explaining it? Imagine having to watch it. On the musical end, there's not much new of note. Some ridiculous choices, like how Artie and Quinn, both in wheelchairs, do a rendition of Elton John's I'm Still Standing. Even more of a lean on popular tunes. It should be noted though, with this season, Glee was actually a trendsetter when it came to new acts, specifically acts emerging from the indie pop world. For example,
give me a second I need to get my story straight.
In the 8th episode of season 3, they close it out with this virtually unknown song, We Are Young by Fun. Now, I was always under the impression that this song blew up when it was used in a Super Bowl ad, but actually, months before that, Glee picked up on it first. You hear that, Jack Antonoff? Glee made you! In addition, it was their use of Gautier's Somebody That I Used to Know that arguably pushed the song to #1 on the Hot 100. Even still, despite the trendsetter status, the show struggled with declining ratings, less charitable critical reception, and only 47 songs from the season on the Hot 100. Still a lot, but less than both seasons 1 and 2. Personally, there were 3 aspects of the show that really started weighing on me. First, the editing. The show's style favors edits that are fast and flashy, but don't gel together on closer inspection. For the musical numbers, this isn't a huge deal, but for other scenes, it is. Here's an example. In this one scene during dance practice, Kurt and Blaine are discussing who will get the lead in the school's production of West Side Story. As a concept, this scene is fine. The dialogue is snappy, everyone acts well enough in it. But the gang is doing a grapevine throughout, and the way they cut between Kurt and Blaine moving in different directions makes the scene feel disorienting.
Yeah, and something's coming.
Those are Tony songs. Are you auditioning for Tony too?
Would that be weird?
No, not at all. I mean, you'd be a great Tony. Be the perfect Tony, actually, in some respects.
Second, the social tokenism the show would parade out regarding certain issues. I said earlier that Kurt's story about coming out was a huge part of the show and an important moment for many of the show's queer fans. There are criticisms that Kurt still embodies a lot of gay man stereotypes, but from what I've read, the consensus is that Kurt's story was handled mostly well. But
hey, Santana, why don't you just come out of the closet?
In season 3, Santana is basically outed by Finn after she goes on a mocking tirade about him, and then outed again in a political TV ad. The way the show frames these 2 instances of gay characters coming out, it strikes me as a bit hypocritical. The third aspect that was starting to wear me out was Rachel Berry. Rachel Berry is, aside from Sue Sylvester, the show's most well-known character. She is also the show's worst character. To be clear though, my comments here are not meant to disparage Lea Michele or her performance. If you're looking for that, just go onto Twitter and watch her former castmates do it themselves. Rachel is established in the pilot as a Broadway hopeful, determined to make it as a star and totally blind to the needs or feelings of everyone else.
Class, in Mr. Schuster's absence, I'd like to go around and ask everyone what solos they'd like to hear me perform at sectionals. All right, you know what? Let me in!
I brought up earlier the show's flaw of no one dealing with any consequences, and that flaw is amped up to the nth degree when it comes to Rachel. She has essentially no character development whatsoever, she never learns from any mistakes, and to make matters worse, she never fails at anything in the grand scheme of things. In season 3, she and Kurt have their auditions for a big performing arts school in New York City. During hers, she flubs the words twice and is rejected.
Excuse me?
You get 8 bars. I gave you 16.
Now that could be an interesting idea. Someone like Rachel getting taken down a peg and having to deal with that failure for the time being. She harasses the school's director and eventually gets in, even though Kurt has a great audition and doesn't get in. The show is so overwhelmingly in Rachel's favor, and it only gets worse from here. As Kyle Turner wrote for the AV Club, it was Rachel, though, who was painted as the one who suffers the most, both ironically and unironically. And it is Rachel who is written as if success, no matter the risks, is her destiny, and everyone else who suffers or lives on the margins of her world or society at large are valuable insofar as the visibility of their trials and tribulations. So the season ends with the gang at Nationals ending their set with Paradise by the Dashboard Light, which is, in my opinion, the other musical high point of the show. It's a really good number. Everybody gets a nice little moment. It still holds up today. They win and become heroes at the school. The last episode is the club hanging out, singing songs, and reminiscing about their time in high school. Will even comes clean to Finn about planting drugs in his locker.
So I planted the pot in your locker and blackmailed you into joining the Glee Club. It was wrong and...
By the end, Rachel is the only one going to New York. Finn, who got rejected from the actor studio, decides to have her go on her own. He'll go into the army, and they'll try to make their relationship work long distance. The ending is Rachel singing as she arrives fresh off the train in New York City. As a whole, this could honestly work as a series finale, and in a thematic sense, it is a finale of sorts. We've gotten to watch this motley crew grow together, and now they've moved on. So how does the show deal with that? Okay, let me try to explain this. For season 4, a whole new cast of students is brought in to replace the old guard, and boy does the show want you to know that these are replacements. The first episode is literally called The New Rachel, and it spends its time having the characters figure out who is the new version of each departed character. Newcomers include Puck's half-brother Noah filling in for Puck, cheerleader Kitty filling in for Quinn and also kind of Santana, Marley the poor girl filling in for, at first, Rachel and then no one. They brought in 2 winners from the second season of the Glee project, Ryder the jock filling in for Finn, and Ali Stroker in one episode. Side note, Ali actually went on to be the first handy-capable person to win a Tony. That's pretty cool. Go Ali. Returning high schoolers include Brittany, Tina, Blaine, Augmented atop Bike Trail, Joe, Unique, and Sugar. Wait, why is she still here? She can't sing. Does she just mouth along in the background? Now you may be asking, are the graduated characters just gone? Well, do you remember that canceled spin-off I brought up earlier and how it would have followed the characters after they left high school? It turns out season 4 only spends half its time in Ohio. The other half is in New York, where Rachel is going to performing arts school, NIADA. In this same first episode, Kurt moves on a whim, and the two get an apartment in Bushwick together that only costs $1,800 a month. Newcomers in this space include Kate Hudson as Rachel's aggressive dance teacher, Sarah Jessica Parker as Kurt's boss when he gets an internship at Vogue in one day, and Rachel's new love interest, Brody. And I gotta say, they do a really good job of fleshing Brody out and making him seem like a real human being. His character traits include being attracted to Rachel. This change in scenery could have been good for the show, allowing these characters, especially Rachel, to learn more about themselves and what it's like to pursue a career in the performing arts. There was potential here. So do they make good on it? What do you think? Yeah, season 4 is a mess, occasionally interesting, but more often half-baked. Believe it or not, when you basically split your show into 2 separate entities, neither one ends up being all that great. On the Ohio end, the new characters have virtually no time to develop, so when the show does another love triangle or another rivalry between 2 girls, I don't know why I should care. Ryder finds out he's dyslexic, and then nothing comes of it. Jake is conflicted about being half white, half black, and half Jewish, and nothing comes of it. Kitty manipulates Marley into having an eating disorder, and nothing comes of it. On the New York end, Rachel is still seen in the show's eyes as a perfect superstar, so even when she gets fairly reasonable, if harshly worded feedback, it's framed as if she's been personally attacked. If there's one character who actually fares well this season, it's Finn. He comes back after being discharged from the army, he breaks up with Rachel in an episode where everyone breaks up with everyone, and he becomes Will's assistant in coaching the Glee Club. He's a character who doesn't get everything he wants, and he has to deal with the consequences and move forward like a human being. In fact, it's interesting to see how differently Rachel and Finn are treated as characters. Rachel nailing every number and being flawless despite not ever learning anything or being held accountable, and Finn being flawed and making mistakes, but still finding ways to do what he loves and share that love with others. There's probably a metaphor about the show in there somewhere. Oh wait, never mind, here's Gangnam Style. Altogether, I just have no reason to care about most of these characters, and if I don't care about them, why should I care about what they sing? Speaking of which, how are the songs this season? What do you think? It's more of the same, pretty much. More modern pop songs, a handful of show tunes. You can definitely start to sense they were running out of solid picks that would feel organic within the story. Like in this scene, a bunch of the McKinley students have a sing-off to see who would be the new Rachel, and this happens.
What song are we singing? What Rachel would sing if she were here. The song of the summer, Call Me Maybe.
Really? Really? Call Me Maybe. Rachel Berry, Barbara Streisand's heir apparent, would sing Call Me Maybe. Are there any notable songs? There's Jane Lynch doing super bass. Turns out she's a huge Nicki stan.
Off with your head! You call me gangster. What? Every time you patronize me, I will take it back.
Leave me alone.
I will knock you out!
There's a mashup of Nelly's Hot in Here with the Jay Giles Band Centerfold. That worked surprisingly well. Blaine does a stripped-down piano version of Teenage Dream that's emotional to the point of discomfort. There's also this.
Let's have a kiki. I wanna have a kiki.
Lock the doors.
Tight.
You know, I think it's important in life to be honest and acknowledge when you don't know much about something, so I'm just gonna say it. I don't know what's going on right now. Okay, so this is a mashup of the Scissor Sisters' Let's Have a Kiki with Burt Bacharach's Turkey Lurkey Time.
It's turkey lurkey time. Tom Turkey ran away, but he just came home.
Yeah, I'm just gonna move on. I think that's it though. Everything else is Glee's typical brand of cookie cutter. Wait, why does this version of Baby Got Back sound familiar? Oh, I know where it's from. It's Jonathan Coulton's version. Jonathan Coulton's an indie singer-songwriter. You might know him best for the 2 songs at the end of the Portal games. It's so cool that Glee would boost Jonathan Coulton's profile like that and include his arrangement. Actually, you know what? I want to take a second and just look up what he had to say about the matter. I bet he was so happy when he... Apparently they didn't credit his arrangement. Like, they just made a version that sounds very faithful to Coulton's.
Find that juicy double. Johnny sees in trouble. Begging for.
And when Coulton found out and reached out to them, Fox's lawyers said it was within their rights and he should be happy with the exposure, even though they don't credit him. I don't even have a joke for that. Jesus Christ. Gross plagiarism aside, most of season 4 is hit or miss in terms of story and music. But there's one episode I want to highlight because it represents the absolute nadir of this show. Other episodes left me feeling annoyed or frustrated, but this is the first episode that actually pissed me off. Episode 18, Shooting Star. The first 20 minutes or so are typical Glee fare, but in the second act, it turns into a school shooting PSA. The sequence depicting the shooting is tense and effective because, of course, it is. How could it not be? The acting by everyone is commendable, even though some points don't hold up. Like, why does Will restrain Sus 4 nearby sidewalk from looking for someone, but then leave the classroom in the next scene to look for someone? Also, they try to shoehorn in resolving Marley and Kitty's rift.
I'm so sorry that I
bullied you into having an eating disorder.
I'm so sorry that I really didn't do anything wrong. One day I'll forgive you.
So yes, the scene is well made, I'll give it that. But I know this show. I know how these writers do things. They're never gonna mention this again. This won't impact anyone or anything going forward. One of the most traumatizing things about an experience like this is the trauma, the memory of the event and having to carry it with you for a long time. But this show is so horribly incapable of portraying something like that. Even though no one got hurt, it would still weigh on these characters. Oh yeah, that's right. Nobody dies or gets injured. Turns out Becky was fearful of graduating and going out into the world, so she brought in a gun to school. It accidentally goes off in Sue's office, and Sue takes the blame and gets fired. And some might say that it's the thought that counts, or it's the depiction that matters most. Heather Morris's acting in the bathroom was really effective. To which I say, true. 10 minutes before this, she was singing Extreme's More Than Words to a cat who had joined the Ku Klux Klan for cats. At best, this episode is well-intentioned but unsuccessful. At worst, it's a craven ploy to boost ratings, and I would have stopped watching here had it not been for this video, plus a little ditty I like to call the sunk cost fallacy. Oh, and in case you're curious, they mention the shooting in the first 10 minutes of the next episode, and then that's it for the rest of the series. Anyways, after that debacle, Rachel auditions for Funny Girl on Broadway by singing the Barbra Streisand classic, Don't Stop Believing. She ends up getting a callback and subsequently the lead role, despite only being a first-semester college student. New Directions goes to regionals and... Wait, aren't regionals in the fall semester? Yeah, so unlike the past seasons, all of season 4 took place in just the first semester. Whatever, they win, and Will and Emma get married. I'll give this finale props. There are worse ways to lose your will to live. All in total, it doesn't feel like anything of actual worth happened this season, and I think that's a big reason as to why so many people dropped off Glee after season 3. According to Billboard, season 4 only managed to get 3 songs on the Hot 100, and they all stayed in the 90s. Even looking at this series box set I got, the only reference to anything past the first 3 seasons on here is this super small pic of the new students doing Grease. I spent $80 on this. In any case, the show had been renewed for 2 more seasons during season 4's second half. Despite ratings, critical opinion, and music sales dropping even further, the Glee train would muster on. That is, until it got derailed.
Now to another story that is breaking overnight. A star of the popular show Glee found dead in his hotel room in Vancouver.
In the summer between seasons 4 and 5, Corey Monteith passed away. It was a tragic event, one that shocked Glee's cast, its fan base, and anyone with a passing knowledge of the show. In order to plan how the show would move from here, it was announced that production would halt for 2 weeks. This led to the season premiere being pushed back 2 weeks, and season 5's episode count being 20 instead of 22. Ryan Murphy also announced that the 3rd episode of season 5 would be dedicated to both Finn and Corey. That episode, The Quarterback, is, I think, the best episode of Glee since at least season 2. I say I think because I'm not entirely sure that it is an episode. I mean, yeah, literally it is, but it sure doesn't feel like one. There are only 2 storylines in it, one about a tree that's wrapped up quickly, and one about Finn's jacket that only comes up in a handful of scenes. The rest is just these characters coming together to make music and grieve someone they lost. On that note, I find this episode so fascinating because it has no interest putting up barriers between the fictitious and the real. It is both a TV episode in which fictional characters mourn the loss of another fictional character, and a recorded grieving session for real actors mourning the loss of a colleague.
No!
For instance, Kurt's really pointed voiceover about people wanting to know how Finn died.
Everyone wants to talk about how he died too, but who cares? One moment in his whole life. I care more about how he lived, and anyone who has a problem with that should remember that he was my brother.
Also, Rachel talking to Will and literally laying out how the show was supposed to end.
I was gonna make it big on Broadway, and then when we were ready, I would just come back, and he'd be teaching here, and I'd walk through those doors, and I would just say, I'm home.
The songs across the board are good. The Club doing Seasons of Love, Mercedes doing I'll Stand By You, which Finn did in season 1, Santana's rendition of If I Die Young, and Leah Michele, who had been dating Monteith, singing Make You Feel My Love.
I could offer you a warm embrace to make you feel my love.
That last song is considered by many to be one of the show's finest musical moments. It's also, incidentally, the last time the show ever made it onto the Hot 100. With this episode, for the first time, there is no pretense in Glee. This feels like the first real acknowledgement by the show that there are some things that Song and Hope and Sue Sylvester's snark can't fix. It's a captivating episode, and I wanted to bring it up first so that I could separate it from the rest of season 5. And I wanted to do that because... Season 5 is one of the worst seasons of television I've ever seen in my life.
But Becky, no, don't!
All of last season's main cast members, both in Ohio and New York, return. Notable guest stars this season include Demi Lovato and the lead singer of Queen plus Adam Lambert. Why can't I remember his name? So let's start with the good parts of this season. They do the Beatles for the first 2 episodes. You can't really mess up the Beatles. Never mind, but the numbers here are fine. Also, Kurt and Blaine get engaged, which is... that's nice. And, that's it. A part of me wants to avoid being critical because I assume some of this season's quality is due to Corey's death. I don't envy the writer's situation at all, having to deal with the death of one of its principal characters and move the show forward. That said... It's just the worst. The storylines this season are some of the most brain-dead things ever filmed for the small screen. The club does a competition to see who's a Katy Perry and who's a Lady Gaga, which leads to Marley getting suspended from the club for not wanting to dress outside her comfort zone. They do a non-canonical Christmas episode involving Rachel, Kurt, and Santana acting as elves for an alcoholic mall Santa, and then bringing another mall Santa home and singing Alvin and the Chipmunks. There is an entire episode dedicated to twerking, with Will defending the students' right to do it. He shows his steadfast support by, of course, obviously, dancing with twerking teenagers to blurred lines. Santana gets the part of Rachel's understudy in Funny Girl despite not having any stage experience and also looking nothing like her. This leads to a massive feud, and it reduces both characters to the absolute worst versions of themselves.
It's really hard being a star.
Shut the hell up, Rachel! Blaine gets really controlling and then hallucinates everyone as puppets because of a gas leak, so he makes puppets for everyone and they all sing... What does the fox say? Eventually, the club performs at nationals, they lose, and Sue, who is principal at this point, shuts down the club. Over the next 2 episodes, which happen to be the show's 100th and 101st episodes, the old students come back to join the club in singing songs from past episodes. Gwyneth Paltrow and Kristen Chenoweth also come back to help save the club, but it turns out they both suck, so no luck there. The last song they do is Don't Stop Believing, which frankly just sounds hollow at this point. And so ends the McKinley High Glee Club. There are still 7 episodes left in the season.
Downtown, things will be great when you're...
For the remaining episodes, the show focuses solely on New York and cuts the main cast down to a third. And it's not terrible. I appreciate the smaller cast, and the plot lines aren't as ridiculous. Mercedes is a recording star after selling CDs out of the trunk of her car. Half-diminished Seventh next to Intersection is a model. Artie's that, but he's also in film school. Kurt and Blaine have some good scenes as they try to navigate their relationship outside of school, but it all feels too little, too late at this point. Wait, zoom in on that TV. That's the credits of Glee. On the TV being watched by the characters of Glee. Does Glee exist in Glee? Rachel eventually gets her big Broadway debut, even though Sue sings part of the big showstopper in an imaginary sequence. Like, why? And her performance gets rave reviews. So what do you think happens next? For real, just take a wild guess at what you think is gonna happen next. That's right. Yep, the very next episode, she becomes disillusioned with the thing she's been working towards since day 1 and gets convinced to fly out to California to audition for a TV show, despite having a performance that same day. She also auditions with Bette Midler's The Rose, even though the show isn't a musical. Jim Rash is just sitting over here like, I've spit better bars than this.
Criminals, Wall Street, taking the pie, and all the black man gets is a plate of white lies. Let me clear my throat. Ha ha ha! I don't know what that was, I don't.
Anyway, she nearly gets fired from Funny Girl and doesn't get the TV show. Rachel learned her lesson for sure. Wait, no, sorry, I read that bit in the script wrong. She actually gets an entire show made about her life. She plans to head out to California as the other New York kids are all prepping for the next stage in their lives, and to commemorate this moment, they sing a song about a volcano erupting. Please end me. Season 5 is terrible, and audiences seem to agree. The ratings went from 5 million viewers at the start to about 1.8 by the end. But anyway, that's done. There's one more season left. Let's get this over with. Season 6, Bless Its Soul, is only 13 episodes long. It premiered in January 2015 and aired on Friday nights. Here's a visual metaphor for shows that are moved to Friday night time slots. In the first episode, we learned that Rachel's TV show absolutely flopped. Having her reputation ruined, she returns to Ohio. She decides to restart the McKinley Glee Club with the help of Kurt, who is using it for school credit. Also, he and Blaine broke up, and Blaine's now dating Karofsky, the guy who bullied Kurt back in season 2. Good for them? Meanwhile, Sue is still principal, and Will is now coaching rival club Vocal Adrenaline. All of the students from seasons 4 and 5, except Kitty, got kicked out by Sue, so of course, they add new characters this season. Jane is the first girl to go to Dalton Academy, and originally starts out wanting to join the Warblers, but transfers to McKinley when she's rejected. Roderick is shy, but has a good voice. Mason and Madison are cheerleading twins. Spencer is a gay jock. Myron's a spoiled child who ends up transferring at the behest of Superintendent Ted Beneke. And Alice, oh my god! That's Phineas O'Connell. That's Billie Eilish's brother and producer. What the hell is this show? I know I've said this before, but there was potential here. The first episode has what might be considered themes about what it means to fail, coming back home, and legacy. Not just for the characters, but the show itself. Does the rest of the season make good on that potential? I mean, it's better than season 5. For one thing, it's shorter. The same issues that have plagued Glee since the start are still here in full force. The new characters don't get much screen time. The plot lines are also still ridiculous, but I don't know, the energy is different. There's a difference between a grown man defending teenagers' right to twerk and Sue being revealed as a shipper for Klaine and locking them in a fake elevator/Saw parody to make them kiss.
You're trapped in an elevator.
This isn't an elevator.
You're trapped in an elevator with a bathroom.
I didn't say it was a good difference, but it's a difference.
Hey guys, do you mind if I ritualistically slaughter this chicken? I want to counteract with the bad luck of Santana seeing me in my wedding dress.
There's also a whole episode focused on Coach Beast transitioning and the cast accepting him as a man. The episode ends with Unique and a 300-person trans choir singing I Know Where I've Been from Hairspray. From the reviews I've read of this episode, the general consensus was it could have been much worse, even if Will does rap Same Love at one point. God, Will sucks so much. Kurt dates Harry Hamlin for a hot sec. Brittany's real dad is Stephen Hawking, which is why she's a super genius. Sue hypnotizes Viennese trichord betwixt toll booths to toy with Rachel's heart and also swap out their sectional set list.
Ascension Millennium by Corey Feldman.
Are you kidding me?
Hi, everyone.
Soothany Silvestano here. Towards the end of the season, not only do Brittany and Santana get married, but they manage to convince Kurt and Blaine to get married too. It's a shipper's dream come true.
Hello?
Before I get lost in these plots, the music this season is okay. At this point, they had foregone physical releases or even single releases and had been putting out each episode's songs as EPs. They do an episode mashing up Carole King and Alanis Morissette, which I'm sure is what all high schoolers circa 2015 were hyped about. They do Hey Ya at the Wedding, a song that is absolutely about everlasting love if you squint your ears. Rachel sings Let It Go from Frozen. That's not notable because of the performance, but because it confirms Frozen exists in the Glee universe, and since Idina Menzel is already in Glee as Rachel's mom, it opens up a whole bunch of parallel universe questions. But enough about my conspiracy theories. Let's get to the ending. The series finale was a two-parter when it aired. The first part was a flashback to the pilot, with many of the side characters getting more time to explore why they wanted to join the club. Everyone looks super old at this point, and it's ironic to realize that a show that became so popular by mining musical nostalgia was now mining its own nostalgia, but it's not a bad episode. The second part is, okay, you know how in other shows they would end by showing like a 5-minute montage of where everyone was or would be? Imagine stretching that montage out to an hour. The New Directions win nationals, Will is made principal of McKinley, which is now an art school, he adds more Glee clubs, and makes Neapolitan 6 adjacent to Roundabout the head of New Directions. The show then jumps 5 years to 2020, where Sue is now vice president under Jeb Bush, Blaine and Kurt are respected arts professionals, they're expecting a baby, and their surrogate is Rachel. Rachel ends up marrying Jonathan Groff's character, and she wins a Tony at the 2020 Tony Awards. The whole gang comes back to McKinley in the newly christened Finn Hudson Auditorium, and they all sing One Republic's I Lived. And that's what you missed on Glee. I worry that by condensing this show down into the most basic, understandable points, I haven't fully conveyed how much of a roller coaster this show is to follow. I've left out a ton already. There was Lea Michele and Naya Rivera's alleged feud in the later seasons, Mark Saling's death, Diana Agron not being in the quarterback episode, Sue Sylvester's wishy-washy villain status throughout the show, the fact that they ruined Tina in the 4th and 5th seasons, the fact that Blaine and Karofsky find out that they're cousins in the last season but still continue to date, the fact that there are virtually no positive relationships between two women anywhere on the show, the fact that they do a funk episode at one point and their definition of funk includes Marky Mark's Good Vibrations, the cast making fun of the show in the years after it ended.
Yes. My least favorite Glee song would probably be Beth.
My least favorite song, I would probably... I mean, Beth is a great answer.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
But it's probably Don't Stop Believing.
Damn it! Yeah. I wrote Gangnam Style.
Tina got abused more than any other character.
Yeah.
My least favorite Glee song is Don't Stop Believin'.
My least favorite Glee song is Don't Stop Believin'.
Was there ever a point where you stopped watching the episodes?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't want to get sucked down the Glee hole any further than I already am, so I want to close this out by asking two questions. The first is, what impact has Glee left on media? I mentioned the Glee effect earlier, but other shows in media also sprung up around Glee that contributed to this pedagogical uptick. Disney movies like High School Musical and Camp Rock helped form the foundation that Glee would eventually launch off of. Pitch Perfect and The Sing-Off came around the time Glee was picking up, and the three together helped a cappella music surge into the spotlight. NBC made their own Glee with Smash, which followed Glee's lead of having a stellar first episode and less stellar rest of the show. Fox's Empire premiered soon after Glee ended and released original songs of its own. From what I've seen, it was solid. There's even Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, which premiered recently.
All I see is a bunch of mostly white people drinking overpriced coffee.
If you're looking for something musical and still focused on high school, I mean, some episodes of Riverdale?
I'm sorry I'm different now. I guess death just changes a person.
Inside I'm hollowed out.
The second question is one that I've been asking myself for a while now, and one that Ryan Murphy himself may have been teasing the answer to. In a now deleted Instagram post, Murphy revealed an idea he had to revamp Glee with Lea Michele, Ben Platt, and Beanie Feldstein. So the question then is, could Glee itself make a comeback? Please God, no. I admit part of that answer is fueled by the fact that I don't want to watch any more of this damn show, but I don't really think this show could work today. First off, the music of today is not as pop dominated as it was in the early 2010s. I could see them doing Dua Lipa, Doja Cat, maybe some Post Malone songs, but you know they would try doing stuff like Bad and Bougie or Sicko Mode or Tootsie Slide. Second, all of their songs would go onto streaming platforms, and a show like Glee, or any TV show for that matter, wouldn't be able to keep up with the speed at which musical trends move now because of streaming. Do you really want to see Glee do TikTok dances months after they're relevant? And finally, Glee was praised in its heyday for promoting social causes, but I think that its attempts would be eviscerated today, and not because of any politically correct backlash. Its championing of LGBTQ rights and diversity is great on the surface, and in some regards, it absolutely deserves its place in history. After watching the show for a while, though, you start to notice how the queer characters on the show often boil down to the most basic of stereotypes, or how the non-white characters are all pushed to the sidelines while Rachel gets yet another solo. As Jeff Jensen wrote for EW about season 6, it arrived so full of progressive fire, representing change and promising hope for more. it now moves towards the exit, dogged by criticism of inconsistency and unmet ambitions, framed as a disappointment. Glee is wholeheartedly a product of its time, for better or worse. And yet we as a culture keep coming back to it. Ever since its 10th anniversary last year and its availability on streaming services, tons of people have either gone back into Glee or started it for the first time. And I can understand why some people are so captivated by it. It exists in its own surreal universe where every social issue was splattered onto its canvas like Jackson Pollock if he was really into Sondheim. It's been said by other critics that Glee was only good in chunks or minutes at a time, which might be the most accurate praise I can muster for it as a whole. Glee could be sporadic, salty, impulsive, ditzy, somber, saccharine, tasteless, and outright awful, sometimes all within the same episode. But when it was good, there was nothing else like it.